There are places in this world that the living were never meant to touch. Spaces where time feels wrong, where the air grows colder even under the midday sun, and where silence speaks louder than any voice. For some, these places are simply stories told by candlelight. But for Era, they were the only truth she had ever known. She was born in the backstreets of an old mountain village forgotten by progress, where the roofs leaked, and the children learned early that dreams cost too much. Era never knew her father. Her mother was a soft-spoken woman who cleaned houses for rich families in the city and came home only once a month, her hands blistered, her eyes too tired to stay open. Era was mostly raised by her Lola, who spoke often of spirits and shadows that lingered just beyond the veil. The dead never sleep, she would whisper, they only wait. When Era was 11, her Lola died in her sleep, peacefully, they said. But Era remembered the night before clearly, how her grandmother sat by the window, humming an old lullaby to no one. How she smiled softly and whispered, "They're calling my name again." After that, the house grew cold in ways no fire could fix. By the time Era turned 17, she had become quiet, watchful. She kept to herself, finding comfort only in the company of her best friend Mika, a warm-hearted girl who brought laughter into dark corners. Mika didn't believe in ghosts or omens. She believed in snacks, silly phone filters, and dreams of moving to Manila one day. She was everything Era wasn't, light to Era's shadow. But even Mika couldn't deny that strange things seemed to follow Era. Lights flickered when she was near. Dogs barked at her window in the middle of the night. And once, during a storm, a woman's voice echoed from the old well behind their school, crying, "Help me, please." Era was the only one who heard it. She told no one, not even Mika. Because Era had a secret, one so deep, it frightened her to speak it out loud. She could hear the dead. It had started not long after Lola died. At first, it was just dreams. Then whispers. Then full voices, like echoes in her chest. They didn't speak like the living. There was something broken in their tone, something lost. But they begged, pleaded, and sometimes they simply wept. One day, desperate for answers, Era followed a whisper into the woods just past the river, a place the villagers called Lugar ng Walang Balik, the place of no return. There, among the tangled roots and pale moss, she found an old stone altar covered in vines and soot. She knelt before it, not knowing why, and when she touched the cold stone, the voices became clearer, hundreds of them, like 1,000 forgotten prayers finally reaching heaven. From that day on, the voices became part of her. She helped them, listened to them, carried their final words. And in return, they gave her visions of lost faces, of hidden deaths, of truths buried in silence. She didn't ask for this gift. It wasn't a blessing. It was a weight, but it was hers. Still, she tried to live normally, to smile with Mika, to help her mother when she visited, to study and pretend that she wasn't unraveling a little more each day. Until the night of the wake. A classmate's cousin had died in an accident, hit by a motorcycle on a blind curve. He was only 16. Out of respect, Era and Mika went to the Lamay, a small, candlelit affair under a tarp beside their classmate's home. The scent of sampaguita and burnt wax filled the air. People prayed, cried, ate, laughed. But Era felt something else. It was too quiet. Not outside, but within the coffin. There was no whisper, no echo. The boy was silent, too silent. She leaned in, pretending to pray. And then she heard it, not from the coffin, but behind her. A soft voice, childlike and hoarse. "Tell her I didn't mean to die." Era turned sharply. No one was there. Just a flickering candle and a faint breeze. Later that night, while walking home with Mika, the shadows stretched longer than they should have. Era tried to ignore the tightness in her chest, the cold crawling up her spine. Mika was talking about their group project, complaining about classmates who never showed up. Her voice was light, but Era couldn't focus. There was a presence behind them. Not footsteps, not a noise, just presence. She didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, she found muddy footprints by her bedroom door, bare, small, and wet, even though the floor was dry. Over the next few days, things got worse. The lights in the kitchen burst when she walked in. Her phone rang at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night, but no one ever spoke on the other end. Her reflection, once, lingered just a second too long after she turned her head. And Mika, always cheerful Mika, began to act strange too. She complained of hearing humming in her sleep, of cold fingers brushing her hair, of dreams where she stood at the altar in the woods, only, in her dream, Era wasn't beside her. Era was inside the altar, screaming silently. They tried to laugh it off, pretend it was just stress or imagination. But then, it happened. Era came home one evening to find her mother standing frozen in the kitchen, eyes wide, hands shaking. She pointed to the hallway and whispered, "Who's the boy in your room?" Era's blood ran cold. She opened the door slowly. At first, there was nothing. Then she saw it. A small handprint on the window pane, as if something had been watching from the inside. That night, Era finally spoke aloud into the empty room. "What do you want?" And from the darkness behind her closet door, a whisper answered back. "You spoke to me. Now I want to speak to you." The lights went out. Everything went black. And in that moment, just before she could scream, Era understood something terrifying. Not all the dead want peace. Some want company. The room was pitch black. The silence so deep, Era could hear the thudding of her own heart. The whisper echoed again, low and cold. "You spoke to me. Now I want to speak to you." She tried to move, but her body refused. Her legs were like stone, her breath shallow. The closet door creaked open just an inch, but nothing came out. Instead, a bitter cold seeped into the air. The small window fogged over, and across the glass, a name was slowly written by an invisible hand. Alone. Then the light flickered back on, and everything was normal again. Except it wasn't. Not anymore. The next morning, Era walked through the house like a ghost. Her mother had gone to work early, and Mika hadn't answered her texts since last night. The air felt heavy, too still, as if something was holding its breath. She tried to shake it off, telling herself she just needed sleep. But when she passed the hallway mirror, she saw it. Her reflection wasn't moving. It stared at her, head tilted slightly, mouth open as if whispering something. But Era stood frozen in place. Then the mirror cracked. She ran out of the house, barefoot and shaking. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the village, where an old bamboo hut stood beside a dried riverbed. It belonged to Mang Isco, the last albulario in their area, a man with cloudy eyes, a back bent by time, and a voice that carried weight like thunder on a distant storm. Most people called him a fraud, a drunk, a madman who mumbled to trees and burned dried leaves while muttering strange prayers. But Era remembered him from her childhood. He had come to their home once when she was small, when Lola had gotten sick. He had stared at Era then, and said something odd. "This one is a bridge. Careful who crosses her." She never forgot it. Now, years later, she stood in front of his door, unsure of what she even wanted. Before she could knock, the door creaked open. "I've been waiting," he said, without looking. Inside, the hut smelled of ash and herbs. Strange symbols were drawn on the walls, and tiny bottles hung from the ceiling like wind chimes, each containing some murky, glowing liquid. "You heard them again, didn't you?" he asked, sitting down with a heavy groan. "But this one is not like the others." Era nodded, barely able to speak. "Who is?" "Alone." Mang Isco went silent. His expression darkened. "He is the beginning of your story," he said. "And maybe its end." He poured a cup of dark tea and placed it in front of her. "You were never just hearing the dead. You were born into something older. Your blood remembers. And now, so do they." Era's hands trembled. "What are you saying?" The old man leaned closer, his eyes no longer cloudy, but glowing faintly. "Your family carries a curse, child, passed through generations. Your Lola knew, but she kept it hidden to protect you. She tried to close the gate before it opened, but the gate is in you." Era shook her head. "What curse? Why me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into a wooden chest and pulled out a small, circular mutia, a shimmering white pearl encased in black string. It pulsed with a soft light, like a heartbeat. This belonged to your great-grandmother, he said. She was once the guardian of the Mutia Ingagos, the tide's heart. It protects the bearer from spirits who walk in water and wind. Without it, the dead will find you. He handed it to her. The moment Era touched it, a wave of memories not her own surged through her. Faces she didn't recognize. Screams. Salt water. Fire. And one word spoken over and over again. Alone. 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 When she opened her eyes, her skin was cold and damp. The one who follows you, Mang Isko said, is not just a ghost. He is an Aswang who drowned 100 years ago, cursed to roam until he finds a new body to possess. Era whispered, "Why is he after me?" The Albulario looked at her with sadness. "Because he thinks you're the key to returning. Because your blood remembers him." The room suddenly grew colder. A gust of wind burst through the window, scattering the bottles above. One crashed to the ground and hissed, releasing thick smoke. Through the smoke, a shadow formed, tall, thin, with hollow eyes and dripping black water from its mouth. Era backed away, heart racing. Mang Isko stood between her and the figure, chanting rapidly in a language she didn't understand. The shadow screamed, a sound like water gurgling through broken pipes, and vanished. The smoke cleared. Mang Isko's hands were shaking. "He's growing stronger," he muttered. "And your presence is feeding him." Era gripped the Mutia tightly, as if it were the only thing anchoring her to this world. "I don't want this," she said. "I never asked for this." "No one ever does," the old man replied. "But you have two choices now. Run and be hunted, or learn to fight." He began drawing a circle on the ground with ash and salt. Inside it, he placed small charms, dried herbs, old coins, a feather, and a piece of bone. "Sit," he said. "We begin now." Over the next few days, Era trained under Mang Isko's watchful eye. It wasn't like learning from books or teachers. It was harsh, spiritual, and exhausting. She learned how to seal doorways with prayer ash, how to chant protection verses from memory, how to sense the movement of spirits in water and wind. But she also started to change. Sometimes she'd wake up from nightmares gasping, only to find her arms covered in seaweed or her hair damp with salt. Her eyes had started to glow faintly in the dark, just a flicker, but enough to scare even her. And then there were the visions. They came randomly, when she touched certain things, or even just stood in certain places. She'd see death, drowning, screams that belonged to the past. And always, alone was there, waiting. One night, while resting beneath an old tree behind the hut, she saw a memory not her own. A woman, her great-grandmother, standing on a cliff, holding the same Mutia, chanting as a storm raged behind her. Below, a creature of the sea, large and broken, roared in fury. She saw the woman hurl the Mutia into the waves, sealing something beneath the tides. But the sea never forgets. When Era returned to the hut, she found Mang Isko asleep, but something felt wrong. The candles were out. The bottles weren't glowing. She stepped inside and froze. The Mutia around her neck was burning cold. And there, standing in the corner of the room, dripping wet and smiling with broken teeth, was alone. "I found you," he whispered, his voice gurgling like water in a drain. Era backed away slowly. But then he wasn't alone. Behind him, more figures began to appear. Pale, hollow-eyed, twisted, Aswangs. They had arrived. And the Mutia was no longer glowing. The candlelight was gone. The warmth of the room replaced with something old and wet and cold. Era stood frozen, the Mutia around her neck no longer pulsing, just dull and heavy, like a stone tied to her chest. Across the room, Alone grinned from the shadows, water dripping from his sunken eyes. Behind him, the other figures flickered into view, silent, thin, and twisted in ways no human body should ever bend. She wanted to scream, to call out for Mang Isko, but her voice had vanished, trapped in her throat like a bird in a cage. "I found you," Alone whispered again. But just as he stepped forward, a sudden crack of smoke erupted from the doorway. Mang Isko, barely standing, held a flaming bundle of dried herbs. He shouted words in an old dialect, and for a moment, the Aswang shrieked and twisted back into the dark. The room shook. Candles reignited. The air grew thick with smoke and burned salt. When the shadows cleared, they were gone. But not for long. Mang Isco collapsed, sweat pouring from his face. "They're testing your strength," he said, his voice faint. "They won't kill you yet. They need you alive until the blood moon." Era knelt beside him, the mutia clutched in her fist. "Why me?" she asked, voice shaking. "Why not someone else?" The old man looked at her, eyes soft but tired. "Because your blood once opened the sea, and now it must close it again." That night, Era couldn't sleep. She sat alone outside the hut, staring at the sky. Her thoughts were loud. Every heartbeat reminded her of what she had seen, what she now knew. But deeper than fear was something else, anger. Not just at the Iswangs, not just at fate, at her mother. She remembered now, little things that never made sense. How her mother would cry in the middle of the night and say, "I should have never come back here." How she refused to speak about the past. How she avoided the sea like it was poison. Era had always assumed it was trauma, poverty, maybe grief. But now she wondered, what if her mother knew about the curse? What if she ran from it and left Era behind to face it alone? The next morning, Era returned home. She had to see for herself. When she stepped inside their small house, everything felt heavier. The pictures on the wall looked older, the windows darker. Her mother was at the kitchen table, folding laundry. She looked up, surprised to see her. "Anik, you didn't call." Era's voice was low. "Why didn't you tell me about our family?" Her mother froze. "What do you mean?" "The mutia, the curse. Alone." The color drained from her mother's face. The towel in her hands dropped. "Lola tried to protect me," Era continued. "But you just left. You knew. You left me to grow up blind to what I am." Tears filled her mother's eyes. "I thought it would skip you. I thought if we stayed quiet, if we never touched the sea again, it would stay buried. I was just trying to save you." Era's voice cracked. "But you didn't. You just delayed it. And now it's worse." Her mother stepped forward, hands trembling. "I lost everything because of that curse. Your father drowned trying to save someone who had already died. And when I saw the signs in you, I couldn't face it again." The silence between them was heavier than any word. Era left without saying goodbye. She couldn't forgive her. Not now. She wandered for hours through the forest trails behind the village, needing air, needing space. Her emotions were storming guilt, betrayal, fear, confusion. The burden of everything was sinking into her bones. That's when she saw something ahead, a child standing alone on the path. It was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, dressed in old, muddy clothes. His head was down. He wasn't moving. "Hey," Era called softly, cautious. "Are you lost?" The boy slowly lifted his head. His eyes were pure black. Before she could run, the ground beneath her shifted, wet and soft, like she was standing in a shallow grave. A cold wind circled around her. The trees began to twist. Then the boy opened his mouth, and 1,000 flies burst out, swarming toward her. She screamed and fell back, but a sudden light exploded from her chest. The mutia, reacting on its own, pulsed once, twice, then burst outward with a sharp wave of energy. The boy vanished in smoke, but he left something behind. A message scratched into the dirt with small, clawed fingers. "The sea remembers your blood." She stumbled back to Mang Isco's hut, face pale, breath short. He didn't ask what happened. He saw it in her eyes. "You're awakening," he said simply. "The dead see you clearly now." Era sat in silence. She didn't want this power. She didn't want to fight. But she also knew she couldn't run. Later that evening, Mang Isco opened an old trunk from under the floor. Inside was a small, coral-carved kabibi, pale green, shaped like a crescent moon, glowing softly. "This was your great-grandmother's," he said. "She used it to trap the Iswang's spirit the first time it rose. But the spell was never finished. The sea released him too early." Era held the shell gently. It was warm in her hand. "You will need to finish what she started," he said. "At the next blood moon, or alone will walk the world again, wearing your face." The thought sent chills through her. Still, she trained, day by day, learning how to seal spirits, how to bless objects, how to call on ancestral memory. But each lesson came with risk. Each night, the creatures came closer. Mika, once cheerful and bright, had started pulling away. She avoided Era's calls. She left school early. When Era finally confronted her, she looked afraid. "I heard voices in my room," Mika whispered. "They said you brought them here. That you're the reason people are having nightmares. That you're cursed." Era felt the sting in her chest, but she understood. She was changing, and not everyone could walk with her into the dark. That night, she stood alone at the edge of the dried riverbed. The sky above her was clear, but she could feel the water moving beneath the ground. "They're waiting for me," she thought. Then a voice echoed behind her. "You are not alone, Era." She turned. Standing in the moonlight was a figure cloaked in sea blue robes. Not a ghost. Not an Aswang. Something in between. It looked like a Babalan, but from another time. "You carry a burden older than memory," the spirit said, "but the blood in your veins remembers the old ways. And the sea is watching." Era swallowed hard. "Then let it watch," she said quietly. "I'm not running anymore." And for the first time, the tide shifted. The war hadn't begun, but the storm was already rising. The nights were growing longer. Era felt it in her bones. The heaviness, the strange rhythm of the wind, the subtle shifts in the trees around Mang Isko's hut. The forest no longer whispered. It listened. Something was coming. Each night, the Aswangs circled closer. Era would hear scratching on the windows, shadows sliding beneath doors, whispers calling her name from places where no one stood. Her dreams were now visions, fragments of something horrible buried in her bloodline, and worse, glimpses of what might come if she failed. Mang Isko was getting weaker too. His body, once steady despite age, was now thin and tired. His chance didn't last as long. His hands shook. He barely slept. "The blood moon is almost here," he said one night, staring into a fire that hissed against the cold. "The curse is awakening, and the sea is hungry." Era sat across from him, clutching the Kabibi and Mutya both like lifelines. They pulsed occasionally with warmth, gentle reminders that the power still lived in her. But it never felt like enough. She was tired. She missed her mother, even though part of her still felt betrayed. She missed Mika, who hadn't spoken to her in days. She missed being normal, waking up without fear, walking through the village without looking over her shoulder. But there was no going back now. That same night, Mika showed up at the hut. Her eyes were wide with fear, her clothes soaked with sweat. "I saw them," she whispered, shivering. "They were in our house. In my dreams. One of them was wearing your face." Era's stomach turned. Mika continued. "They said, if I come near you again, I'll be next." Era felt her throat tighten, guilt pressing hard against her ribs. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to touch you." But Mika grabbed her hand, firm. "I'm scared, Era. But I'm more scared of losing you." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mika added, "If you're going to fight them, you're not doing it alone." Era blinked back tears. Even in darkness, friendship still held light. From that day on, Mika began training with them, learning basic protections, memorizing old chants, marking her skin with sigils Mang Isko taught. It wasn't much, but it helped. And Era needed her, not just for battle, but for hope. Still, every day brought more signs. A small girl was found wandering near the mangroves, her mouth full of black sand. An old fisherman vanished under calm water. A pregnant woman said she woke up with bite marks on her ankles and salt water in her bed. The villagers were panicking. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the Aswangs were nesting in the hills. Others whispered about a gate opening beneath the old well. But worst of all were the stories of double shadows, people whose reflections moved differently, smiled at the wrong times. Mang Isko said it clearly. They're feeding, preparing. The blood moon was just 5 days away. Each day, Era trained harder. She practiced with the Kabibi, learning how to call on its light, how to use its sharp edge against spirit forms. It wasn't a weapon of force. It was a weapon of memory. Each time she activated it, the sea within her pulsed louder, wilder, like it wanted to burst free. But something still held her back. Doubt. She began having dreams, not visions this time, but memories she had never lived. Her great-grandmother standing on a burning boat. Her grandmother sealing a mirror with blood. Her mother, younger, crying on the beach, holding a small black box and throwing it into the waves. Era didn't know what it meant, but the dreams came every night. Sometimes, the sea whispered to her. Sometimes, it screamed. Then, on the fourth night before the blood moon, everything changed. Mika and Era had gone to the village to warn people, to help prepare basic wards for their doors and windows. Most listened. A few laughed. One man spat and said, "This girl is cursed. The more we listen to her, the faster we'll all die." That same man was found the next morning, hollow-eyed, his body drained of color, water still dripping from his ears. The message was clear. The enemy was watching. Mang Isko began preparing the final ritual. "You won't stop them all," he told Era. "But you can close the breach. You can trap alone again. If your heart is steady." Era stared at the symbols on the floor, the circle of crushed shells and salt. "But what if I fail?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her something new, a dagger, old and coral-stained, wrapped in dried kelp. "This belonged to the first tiebinder," he said. "Use it only if the light fades." That night, Mika found Era alone, sitting by the stream behind the hut. "Do you ever wonder," Era asked, "if maybe we're not meant to win?" Mika sat beside her, silent for a moment. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know you were meant to fight. Maybe that's enough." They sat there until the stars appeared. But even the stars felt cold now. Then came the third night before the blood moon. That's when the ground cracked. Literally. Near the old well, a deep fissure opened, filled with black water that steamed even in the night air. People said they heard voices, babies crying, waves crashing, something chanting underwater. The animals in the village fled. And when Era approached the well, the mutia around her neck went dark. She looked down into the crack and saw eyes staring back. Dozens. Hundreds. Watching. Waiting. Back at the hut, Mang Isko confirmed her fear. They're breaching early. Alone knows you're stronger than your bloodline. He's afraid of you. That makes him reckless. But it also makes him dangerous. That night, Era couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, Kabibi in her hand, and wondered what would be left of her after this was over. Even if she won, who would she be? A girl with ghosts? A walking curse? She missed her mother. She wanted to believe there was love buried under the silence and fear. But part of her was still broken, still angry, still unsure. She heard Mika stir behind her. "You okay?" her friend asked softly. Era shook her head. "No, but I have to be." They held each other for a moment, silent in the dark. Then Era stood up. She looked toward the well, toward the sea beyond the hills, toward the crack in the world she hadn't made, but was now being asked to close. Her hands trembled, but her heart beat strong. The blood moon was rising, and the sea was calling her name. The wind had changed. By the time Era woke the next morning, the air was thick and heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. No birds, no rustling trees. Even the insects had gone silent. The blood moon was now just 2 nights away. Era stepped outside Mang Isko's hut, the mutia around her neck glowing faintly. She could feel the pressure building, not just from outside, but deep within her. The sea inside her veins pulsed louder, more erratic, like it was warning her of something even worse than she had prepared for. And it was right. That day, Mang Isko sent Era and Mika back into the village with a final task: distribute the last of the protective charms, made from ash, blessed coral, and hair from an untouched child. Place them near doorways, under pillows. Tell no one where they come from. Just protect who you can. As they walked through the village, Era noticed something strange. Too many people were avoiding her eyes. Some even whispered behind doors. She caught one woman crossing herself, another pulling her child closer. "They're scared," Mika said quietly, "but not of the Aswangs. Of you." Era nodded slowly, her heart sinking. "They think I'm the one bringing the curse." Mika sighed. "They don't understand what you're protecting them from. They just want someone to blame." That night, the air turned colder. The moon hung low like an open wound, and the trees around the village began to twist unnaturally, leaning in toward the houses like watchers. Era couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with memories, her mother's warnings, Mang Isko's teachings, the crack by the well, and the dreams. They were sharper now. She saw herself walking into the ocean, smiling, her body covered in glowing barnacles. She heard Alone's voice inside her head. You are mine. You always were. She woke in sweat, heart pounding. But it wasn't a dream anymore. There were footsteps outside. Not heavy, but deliberate. Slow. Era stood, grabbing the Kabibi from beside her bed. The pulse in her mutia was faint, like it was hiding. She opened the door and found her mother standing there, soaked, pale, eyes wide with fear. Mama. Era's voice broke. Her mother stepped in, barely able to speak. They came for me. I ran. I had nowhere else to go. Era pulled her in, shutting the door quickly behind them. She helped her mother to a chair, gave her tea. But the silence between them was heavy. After a moment, her mother finally spoke. I saw your father. Era froze. His spirit. By the old mangroves. He told me, the bloodline can't be broken. That the sea always takes what belongs to it. Her mother began to cry. I should have told you everything. I just wanted to forget. I thought if I kept this away, maybe it would die with me. Era sat across from her, still holding the Kabibi. But it didn't. It grew. There was another long silence. And then, something unexpected happened. Mang Isko stepped into the room from the back. He had gone to fetch more herbs. When he saw Era's mother, his eyes went dark. You, he said, low and sharp. You were warned never to return. Her mother stood, trembling. Please. I didn't know it would reach Era. I didn't. Mang Isko pointed at her. You did know. You didn't just run. You bargained. Era's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Mang Isko turned to her. Your mother struck a deal with the sea spirits. To save herself, she gave them something more valuable. Her mother was crying harder now, shaking her head. No, I never meant for it to happen. I didn't know they'd come for you instead of me. What did you give them? Era asked, her voice trembling. Her mother didn't speak. Mang Isko answered. You. Era's heart cracked. Her vision blurred. All these years, Mang Isko continued, they were waiting, feeding, watching you grow, because your life was the offering. Era backed away slowly, unable to breathe. Her mother reached for her, whispering, I'm sorry, Anik. I was scared. I lost your father. I couldn't lose myself. But all Era could hear was you. She had been cursed from the beginning. Not by fate, not by Alone, but by the one person who was supposed to protect her. She walked out into the night. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed air, space, anything but that room. Mika followed quietly, keeping her distance. They sat together under the trees near the dried riverbed. After a long silence, Era finally spoke. I was never meant to survive this. Mika shook her head. That's not true. She gave me away, Mika, before I could even speak. And now I have to fight something older than memory. With what? A piece of shell? A dying man's chant. Mika touched her shoulder. You still have a choice. You can break the cycle. Your mother ran. But you're standing. Era wiped her tears, looking up at the sky. Then why does it feel like I've already lost? Mika didn't answer. The wind picked up again. And then, something strange happened. The ground cracked again, right beneath them. A long, thin slit opened in the dirt, steaming with cold mist. A dark shape rose from the center. It wasn't Alone. It was something else. A mirror, tall, ancient, made of bone and driftwood, covered in runes. And inside it, Era saw herself. But not the girl sitting in the forest. The girl inside the mirror was wearing barnacles. Her eyes were hollow. Her smile was wrong. And she was reaching out from the other side. Mika pulled Era back just as the mirror shuddered and cracked. Then, silence. The mirror sank back into the ground. The crack sealed. But its message was clear. There's another Era. And she's ready to take her place. Back at the hut, Mang Isko was waiting. She's near, he said, the shadow you saw. That's your echo. A reflection of what you'll become if you fail. Era stared at the floor, the weight of everything pressing harder. Her role wasn't just to fight the Iswangs. She had to fight herself. Her fear. Her blood. Her past. The enemy wasn't just outside. It was inside her, too. And it was almost free. The night of the blood moon had arrived. The sky burned red like a fresh wound across the heavens. The trees bowed toward the earth as if mourning. The sea, hidden behind hills and forest, hummed like a warning drum. Every living thing seemed to hold its breath. And in the stillness, Era stood alone. The mutia around her neck was glowing white-hot now. The kabibi in her hand pulsed like a heartbeat. But she was not steady, because deep inside her, something stirred. That reflection, the one she saw in the mirror from the crack in the forest, had returned in her dreams. This shadow version of herself whispered promises. You don't have to suffer. Give in, and you'll never be afraid again. Era could still hear the voice, but she didn't have time to doubt. The breach near the well had opened wider. The earth cracked in long spirals, stretching toward the forest like dark veins. Steam and brine poured from below. At the center, the water rose in slow spirals, cold, black, shimmering like oil. Era felt it before she saw him. Alone. He rose from the water like a god of ruin, towering, shifting, not entirely flesh. His eyes were endless, full of ocean storms and hunger. Seaweed clung to his arms like armor. Fish bones adorned his throat. Around him, a chorus of spirits moaned, voices of the drowned. But his eyes locked only on Era. You were promised to me, he said, his voice layered with centuries of rage and sorrow. Era didn't flinch. You were promised a child. But I am not a child anymore. Alone stepped forward, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. You carry our power. You were seaborn. You were meant to be the gate. Era raised the kabibi, and the glow pushed him back a step. I carry your power. But I don't belong to you. The sky cracked with thunder. From the trees, Mika appeared, clutching a bundle of herbs and protective charms. Behind her, Mang Isko chanted low, his voice blending with the wind. They circled Era, creating a seal of salt, coral, and ash. But Alone laughed, a sound like tidal waves crashing into bone. You think old magic will stop the tide? You forget, little girl, you were born of salt. You are the tide. Then, from the darkened forest, she appeared. Era's reflection. The girl from the mirror. She walked barefoot, her eyes blank and glowing faint blue. She moved like a puppet, graceful but unnatural. She stopped beside Alone and turned toward Era, wearing her face like a mask. She's your shadow, Alone said. Let her take the pain. Let her carry your sorrow. You can be free. Era shook her head, tears in her eyes. She's not me. She is what you were meant to become, Alone hissed. Then, with a roar, the spirits surged forward, waves of sea-born wraiths, twisted faces of the forgotten dead. Era braced herself, kabibi raised, mutia burning against her chest. Mika threw a charm into the air, and a wave of light burst outward, pushing the first few spirits back. Mang Isko held the chant, beads of sweat pouring from his face. But it wasn't enough. The spirits surrounded them. The earth cracked again. Alone raised both hands, and the water surged, pulling Era from her feet. She tumbled into the darkness, cold, salt water filling her lungs. And then, she was inside the sea. Not just drowning, becoming it. She saw the faces of her ancestors, her father, her grandmother, even those she had never met. All of them pulling, reaching, begging for her to surrender. The reflection appeared again, swimming toward her, smiling. Just let go? We are safer here. Down here, no one can hurt us. But then, Era remembered Mika's voice, her mother's trembling apology, Mang Isko's weary chant, and she remembered something else. Love, not the safe kind, but the hard kind, the kind that breaks you and builds you again. Era clutched the kabibi tightly, and she rose. With a scream that shattered the silence, she burst from the water and slammed the kabibi into the earth beside the breach. The salt in her blood answered. The sea within her raged, not in surrender, but in defiance. The water recoiled. Alone staggered. No, he growled. This is not your power to command. But Era stood tall, soaked and shivering, kabibi burning in her hand. It is mine now. The reflection stepped forward. You can't destroy me, the shadow Era said. I'm your pain. Your fear. I know, Era whispered. That's why I'm setting you free. She stepped forward and touched her reflection's hand. For a moment, they stood in silence. And then the shadow cracked, like glass breaking underwater. The false Era shattered into light, drifting away like fireflies over the sea. Alone roared, his form unraveling. You've broken the bond. The breach began to collapse in on itself. The spirits held in terror, pulled back into the abyss. Era pressed the Mutia into the earth. One final light surged, a blinding wave of warmth. And then silence. The earth closed. The air cleared. The blood moon faded, swallowed by clouds. Alone was gone. The spirits were gone. Era collapsed to her knees, gasping, crying, shaking. It was over. Mika ran to her, holding her tight, both of them sobbing with relief. Mang Isko, barely standing, nodded once before falling to the ground, exhausted but alive. For a while, no one said anything. There were no words. Just the sound of the wind returning. The stars above. The earth beneath. And the sea quiet once more. The village changed after that. No one spoke of what happened directly. But they looked at Era differently. Some with awe. Others with fear. A few with silent gratitude. Her mother left quietly one morning, leaving only a letter. I cannot undo what I've done. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I love you. I always did. Mang Isko stayed for a few more days, then returned to the mountains. Mika stayed with Era. They began cleaning the forest, rebuilding old protective stones, placing markers where spirits once walked. And Era? She still dreams of the sea. But now, when she walks near it, she hears only her own voice. Strong, unbroken, free, or so she thinks. Because, on the final page of Mang Isko's old book, one she hadn't noticed until weeks later, was a drawing of the mirror, and a note beneath it. Every reflection leaves a trace. And deep in the forest, just beneath the roots of a dead tree, a new crack begins to form. The sea was quiet now. For the first time in years, the air around Era felt still. No whispers, no cries, no visions of things that should have stayed buried. Just silence. And in that silence, something soft bloomed inside her. Peace. But peace, she would learn, didn't come without a cost. The weeks after the blood moon passed in a blur. The village slowly returned to normal, though normal was different now. Some people avoided her. Some offered quiet nods. Some children stared in awe when she walked past. It was like being caught between two lives, part of them, but also not. Mang Isko had left silently, leaving his hut and books behind for Era. She found old journals, rituals, letters, some written in symbols even he hadn't translated. She read what she could every night, sometimes with Mika, who stayed by her side through everything. I don't think he expected to survive, Mika whispered one night, running her fingers along a worn leather cover. But he made sure you'd have the tools to continue. Era nodded slowly. He taught me more than I realized. The days were quieter, but not easy. The well was sealed. The breach was gone. But something always lingered, like the sea inside her blood had left a memory behind. Sometimes, at night, she'd dream of her reflection again. Not as a threat. Not as a monster. Just standing in the tide, watching her. Not evil. Just waiting. Then came the visit. Era was tending to herbs near the old garden when a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the trees. Her mother. Older than Era remembered now. Worn. A little thinner. Her clothes torn from travel, but her eyes steadier than before. May I sit? She asked, barely above a whisper. Era nodded once. For a while, they said nothing. Just listened to the wind through the trees. The smell of earth. The sound of leaves brushing skin. I stayed away for too long, her mother finally said. I kept thinking distance would protect you. That if I didn't tell you the truth, maybe it would die with me. Era didn't answer right away. Her voice, when it came, was calm. But it didn't die. It grew. Her mother nodded slowly. I was selfish. Afraid. After your father was taken, I couldn't accept that the same blood ran in your veins. Era looked down at the Mutia resting against her chest. It was no longer glowing, but it was still warm. Alive. I hated you, she said softly, almost surprised to hear herself say it out loud. For giving me away. For making me carry something I never asked for. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. You have every right. But I don't hate you anymore. The words surprised them both. I understand now, Era continued. Pain doesn't go away by hiding it. It passes down like a curse. Unless someone is brave enough to stop it. She stood, looking toward the sea in the far distance. I stopped it. Her mother reached into her pocket and held something out. A simple bracelet, made of woven shells and old fishing thread. It was your father's, she whispered. He wore it the day he disappeared. I found it on the shore 2 nights after. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Era took it slowly, holding it like something sacred. Not a weapon, not a charm, just a memory. A reminder of what was lost and what was left behind. In the following days, the forest seemed lighter, the trees less heavy. Even the old spirits that once clung to the village had faded. But Era knew something else now. That magic, real magic, wasn't about fire and chance or glowing stones. It was in choice, in sacrifice, in standing your ground even when your soul trembled. She visited the sealed well one final time, planted white flowers around its edge, lit a single candle for the lives that were lost, and whispered, I forgive you. Not for them, for herself. On the last day of the dry season, Mika came to her with a map. A traveler dropped this off. He said it belonged to Mang Isco. Said he left it with instructions, only to be given to you if you survived. Era took the map, unfolding it slowly. It was old, faded, but drawn with care. It showed rivers, mountains, buried temples, forgotten villages. And near the bottom, scribbled in Mang Isco's handwriting, where one crack closes, another opens. Protect the balance. You are not the end. You are the beginning. Era looked at Mika. You think we're ready for more? She asked. Mika grinned. With you? We'd better be. They laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. And the sound echoed through the trees like a promise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Era stood at the edge of the village one last time. She looked back once, at the place where she had cried, fought, screamed, grew. She still carried the Mutia, the Kabibi, the bracelet. But she also carried something else now. Hope. There would be more cracks, more spirits, more evil. But she was no longer running. She was walking forward into the dark, with fire in her heart, and the sea at her back. Final reflection, narrator's voice, soft and haunting. They say when you speak to the dead, they hear you, but not all of them return. Some listen, some linger, and some follow. But the ones who stay, they're not always here to haunt you. Sometimes, they stay to remind you who you are, and who you must become. This was Era's story. But maybe, it's also yours. The end.